Tonight we're going to talk about the situation, the political and social situation of Taiwan in the 1950s. If you can remember, whatever you have learned from your history lessons, the 1950s are of great importance in the shaping of modern world. You know, during the 1950s, you have say in Europe, you have the so-called the Spring of Prague. The people in Czechoslovakia fought for their independence, and you have the Korean War, you have other situations worldwide, and you have the Cuba crisis, which happened in early 1960s. But again, you have the Berlin blockade, end of 1948. Throughout the 1950s, you can see the confrontation of these so-called the First World, the Second World, or the Soviet and American confrontation. So 1950s, there are all these international developments, political developments also affected Taiwan. And Taiwan could have been conquered by the Chinese, the PLA, People's Liberation Army, if the America didn't kind of stretch out on time or in time to help give the Taiwanese people help. And therefore the 1950s was really of great importance. So let's now try to remember what happened towards the end of the Second World War. Well, the Allied Air Force raided Taiwan intensively, as we have known. The first wave of the air raid started in October 1944. Well, around this time, the Japanese army already kind of showed that they couldn't last the fight any longer because of the supply for all the materials, resources to last the war is kind of coming to an end. And when the Japanese could not fight back, the Allies intensified their warfare or their attack in the Far East area. And therefore, at the end of the 1944, the Allied Air Force started to bomb the Taiwanese industrial facilities, such as the well, how do you define the industrial facilities? If there is a huge chimney, there's already an indication, and therefore, a lot of brewery. Well, this is not industrial facility, but still it's a big chimney, and this also be the target of the American bombers. So, first of all, the southern part of Taiwan was actually raided, and then the air raids moved northbound to Taipei. It's the political center. On the 31st of May, this is of great importance, that Taipei was bombed heavily. Over 30 civilians were killed, 3,000 civilians were killed during this the air raid. So this is a picture of the American bombing. That's the bomber that took all these possible bombs, which dropped on top of Taipei. And you can see that's the bombs dropped in Taipei. This area, in the brighter color, was actually the central part of Taipei. If you go to the East Gate, have you been to the East Gate, Dongmen, right? You have the President's office, you have the First Girls High School, you have the Bank of Taiwan, you have the Bureau of Justice, and so on. That was actually the administrative center of Taipei, 1945, and that was actually bombed intensively. You can see every red dot means a serious bombing spot. So, on the 6th of August, the American Air Force dropped an automatic bomb on Hiroshima. And then, well, you know that once that's the first time that human being ever used the atom bomb. And of course, the world was frightened, especially the Japanese. And before that, the American government already spoke to the Soviet Union to urge the Soviet Union to declare war to Japan. During this time, the warfare in Europe is already ended. Germany is surrounded on the 8th of May. On the 7th of May, surrounded to Russia, and the American were not satisfied. Why should it be surrounding to Russia, not to us? Therefore, on the 8th of May, the German government repeated the surrender, and therefore the warfare in Europe stopped already. So the Soviet Union decided to declare war on Japan, and immediately their forces entered Manchukuo in the Manchuria. And on the 9th of August, another bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. Well, before the second bomb, the Japanese government already decided to give up, want to surrender. But now we want to know why the Americans will have to drop the second bomb. Do you know the reason? Was the second bomb necessary? No, absolutely not. And the second bomb, of course, cost another, say, hundreds of thousands of lives. And what was the reason?
I read that the Japanese were too late with their surrender because the communications between Hiroshima and the rest of Japan, of course, were interrupted. So at first nobody really knew what happened. So kind of sounds funny, I know, but I read that somewhere.
Because 1945, the communication system is already much more, very, very much advanced, right? And after the bombing of the first bomb dropped, there is already communication between the American government and the Japanese, negotiating about the possible surrender.
Probably had something to do with the Russians and the Soviet Union. They didn't want them to get further in.
No. Well, the reason was actually these two bombs were made of different formula, right? And the Americans wanted to try it out, and this is the best chance to try it out. Yeah, this is true. But therefore, the second bomb was absolutely unnecessary. I will have to remember this. Okay. So anyway, either or, the Japanese were going to surrender. Right. So perhaps the second bomb intensified or quickened the process. Actually, you don't think that during the fights, during the war, there was no communication between two hostile countries. On the contrary, there was always communications there, right, through third country. In Switzerland, for example, there's another one possibility, and somewhere else, the Vatican, everywhere, they can serve as say, mediator. But anyway, the second bomb dropped. Another, as I said, hundreds of thousands of lives sacrificed. So, therefore, the Japanese Emperor Hirohito was asked to intervene and ordered Japanese political leaders to end the war. There was actually the so-called 5 big heads: the leader of the army, the leader of the navy, the leader of the general staff, right? So they were asked to surrender. Of course, there were resistance in the country. Some young generals, some young So all officers, they refuse to surrender. Well, you can see this kind of thing everywhere, in every country. And they even planned some kind of putsch to urge the country, the nation, to fight till the last drop of blood was shed. But anyway, the Japanese government announced its official capitulation. And all the terms of the Potsdam Declaration were to be accepted. Those of great importance for Taiwan, because during the Potsdam Conference, there was already a mention about the situation of Japanese colonies, for example, Korea and Taiwan. These were to be returned, or either the political independence be restored. So on the 15th of August, Hirohito gave a pre-recorded speech over the radio to announce the Japanese capitulation. There was a special term called the Japanese emperor's speech is always called Yu, the sound of, or the voice of jade, right? That he almost actually the first time the Japanese emperor spoke directly to the nation. So this again, the situation can be broadcasted out without any problem. Right? So people actually did realize what happened in Hiroshima. And this was the picture of Hirohito signing the announcement the Japanese government was ready to surrender. And there was actually the document written, well, if you understand Chinese, you can understand this declaration. So, on the 2nd of September 1945, a Japanese delegation headed by the Foreign Minister Shigemitsu and the General Yoshijiro Umezu. The Umezu was actually later on tried as the war criminal, right? And they were brought to the U.S. ship Missouri to sign the Japanese instrument of surrender. And the term, the Japanese instrument of surrender, became a historical document. And the Chinese delegation was actually invited by the American government to join this acceptance of surrender. And this delegation was headed by General Xu Yongchang. And immediately the investigation into the Japanese war crime began. So this was actually the ceremony of the Japanese surrender. You can see that he's on board of the Missouri, and this is actually the Shigemitsu, and this is the Umezu. This is the leader of the Japanese army. And he was sentenced and served his terms. I think before the end of the term, he died in the jail. And this Shigemitsu was also punished as a war crime, but later he was released, and then he served again as the Japanese foreign minister after the Second World War. And on the other hand, in Taiwan, the local army, headed by the Governor General Ando, was also ready to surrender, and the Chiang Kai-shek appointed then General Chen Yi as the Governor General, the new Governor General of Taiwan. So therefore Ando surrendered to Chen Yi, as you can see here from this picture, that on the right-hand side, that's the Chen Yi accepting the surrender from the Japanese Governor General Ando. But interesting enough, before the acceptance of the surrender and after the Japanese surrender, there was a time that the Chinese Governor General were not in Taiwan, and the Japanese Governor General still acting as the governor of Taiwan. And people all say that during this time, the Japanese did their job properly, kind of packing up all the things and counting on everything, so to be ready to be handed over to Chinese. And during this time, the Japanese currency also were in circulation. Right? So there was a short period of political vacuum. And we have seen this picture already, that the Chinese and Taiwanese celebrated the recovery of Taiwan. You can see on the slogans that we have recovered the old land and we want to establish a new Taiwan. But that didn't happen immediately, and only after 1960s this kind of process could take place. And this picture is funny enough that it's actually taken, say, 50 years later, right? Same place. From this picture, you can see that actually there was actually a gate established or constructed for the ceremony, but it was actually right in front of the city hall, then called Zhongshan-tang. So this was actually the building. Of course, this time there was not so serious and not so colorful, but nevertheless, the Taiwanese still celebrated the so-called Guangfu-jie, the recovery festival. But later on, this so-called Guangfu-jie was cancelled by the DPP party because they thought there was not actually the recovery, but rather the Taiwanese was actually handed over to another colonist. And the surrender didn't follow up by the proper treaty, and the treaty only took place much later. On the 8th of September 1951, so almost 6 years later, the peace treaty was actually signed between 48 nations, and this treaty was signed in San Francisco. Therefore, the people call it the San Francisco system. Right? 48 nations engaged in the war with Japan, which gathered together to sign the peace. And war, the Second World War, with Japan. So the war with Japan officially ended then with the signing of the peace treaty. So this was actually the treaty itself. Right? And we have to read that the treaty says Japan should officially renounce her control over Taiwan and Penghu. And the political situation of Taiwan was kind of somehow in question, and therefore there was actually a separate peace treaty between the ROC government and Japan. And they signed another treaty, the Sino-Japanese peace treaty, that took place on the 28th of April 1952. And this treaty, Japan and the ROC government kind of started a new friendship. And of course, the condition was actually the ROC government gave up all the rights to demand any kind of compensation. Right? And later on, when Japan and Taiwan broke up, when Japan decided to recognize the government of the People's Republic, So they have to sign another peace treaty with the PRC government. And also in the PRC, the new Sino-Japanese peace treaty, the compensation was not in the question. So therefore the Japanese never paid any kind of compensation to China. Whereas the case of Germany, Germany never stopped, or Germany paid the compensation to the Israeli government for over 20-something years, right? Paying with building materials, with all these instruments, all the tools and so on. And I think other countries also demanded compensation. In the case of Taiwan and China towards Japan, the compensation was ruled out. So, can you read the treaty itself? Right. So, Article 2. The Japanese government ceded to China the island of Formosa and joint minor islands, including Pescadores and so on. Right? And there's always a question about the so-called Shingaku. You know the Shingaku Islands? There was always in dispute. And Taiwanese government as well as Chinese government still claim the Shingaku Island to be the Chinese territory, whereas the Japanese was actually in control of the Shingaku Islands. And every now and then there were kind of conflicts between Taiwanese, Chinese and Japanese government. When the Taiwanese fishermen and the fisher boats approached the islands, there will be detained, fined. And whereas the Chinese fisher went abroad or went on board of the island, they will be expelled. But the treatment was less harsh as the Japanese treatment towards Taiwanese. But anyway, the Shingaku Island was still in question, and this the question that we should talk about later. So. Then we come back to 1948, when Chiang Kai-shek was defeated in northern China. So China decided or intended to move to Taiwan. Therefore, Taiwan became very important. So the Communist Party and the Kuomintang, the two parties confronted along the Yangtze River on the 1st of October 1949. The Chairman Mao announced that the People's Republic of China was founded. You can see the big picture. Oh no, I don't have the picture. But anyway, you can see always that the picture of Tiananmen, Mao Zedong on the gate of the Tiananmen Square, announcing that the People's Republic of China was founded. But then the Chiang Kai-shek was still on the south part of the Yangtze River, and the Communist Party then massived a huge army to across the Yangtze River, and Chiang was forced to leave. Chiang had already planned the possible retreat to Taiwan, so he decided to move all these having the gold reserves from the central bank, then was actually located in Shanghai, to move to Taiwan, which was actually later on the guarantee of issuing the Taiwanese currency. And Jiang Jingguo then started to organize ships and move all the valuable things. We've talked about the treasures of the Palace Museum, and we're not talking about the gold reserves from the central bank. Everything was actually moved to Taiwan. And funny enough, before long, the Communist Party always claimed that the gold reserve was actually stolen by Chiang Kai-shek to Taiwan. Now they don't use the word steal, they use another word, kind of secretly transport. Right? Though I think the term is much milder, just like about things about the treasures from the Palace Museum. So anyway, with the gold reserve, the Taiwanese economy was actually had a chance to start over. So in December 1949, Chiang Kai-shek and his followers arrived Taipei. So this is actually the father and son you are not kind of unfamiliar with. The father was actually chosen or elected as the president in 1948 before the tragedy happened, before he was totally defeated by the Communist Party. And this picture was actually taken after Chiang Kai-shek was sworn in as the president of the Republic of China, then still on mainland China. And but soon after his inauguration, he was forced to lay down his office and went back to his hometown. And then he visited Taiwan secretly several times, and that's when he decided, okay, we should take Taiwan as the possible place to regain control. And at that stage, Chiang Jing was still very young, right? Something like late 30s, early 40s. So Chiang Jing was born 1910 in Zhejiang, his hometown, and died 1988 in Taipei. He was the firstborn of Chiang Kai-shek. And during his youth, he went to Moscow to be trained there. And therefore his Russian is much better than his Mandarin. He speaks, when he spoke Mandarin, always with a very thick Zhejiang accent. And he married actually a Russian lady. And he came back to China in his late 20s and then started working with his father. So he then served as a general, and then in the government, and then as the prime minister, and then in 1978 he was elected as the president. So we can see here in this picture that there was actually the offshore islands outside of the Zhejiang province. So just like Zheng Zhenggong did 300, 400 years ago, when he was forced to leave China, there was still offshore islands in his control. Jiang did the same thing. After retreating from China, he still controlled several islands along the Chinese coast, southeast coast. Like this is the Zhejiang province. You must have heard or have been to Jinmen and Mazhu. Those actually outside of the Fujian province, the offshore islands of the Fujian province. And later on, this Dachen, Yijiangshan and so on became a serious battlefield that we can talk about later. So along with Chiang Kai-shek, a lot of Chinese arrived to Taiwan. As for how many there were, we don't really know, because at that stage there was no registration system, and some of them died and some of them went back to mainland China, because still towards the end of 1949, early 1950, the boat, the ship, still kind of sailing between these two political entities, and postal service was still actually in use. That's why my father is still saying like early 1950. he was able to write home. And therefore my grandfather realized or did know that his son arrived to Taiwan safely. But this kind of communication broke up later. And the first population census took place in 1956, and during which it shows that the Taiwanese population, about 13% of Taiwanese population were actually from mainland China. This figure, the 1,210,000 of the people from mainland China, included over 300,000 of the military servicemen. Right. And this, but the so-called 300,000 was only a figure given by the government, as how there was no exact figure there, because just some of them, well, there was always kind of political conflicts there between this party and that party. You must have heard about the General Sun Liren, who was actually under house arrest by Chiang Kai-shek in Taichung, or the
What's his name?
Sun Liren. Sun. He graduated from the West Point and was actually a very famous general, supported by Americans. Therefore, the Chiang Kai-shek was actually worried about the possible usurpation, and therefore just put him under house arrest. And another one is the leader of Manchuria, Zhang Xueliang, who was under house arrest for over 40 years, right, without any sentence, without anything, under house arrest. So, by that time, the Taiwanese population was about, say, 9 million, 9.3 million, and the percentage was roughly the same. But because of the intermarriage, and every single one has some kind of relation with mainland Chinese or vice versa. So Chinese must have, the mainland Chinese have some connection with the Taiwanese. So the percentage so safe to be remain the same, but the social network or the social relation should be totally different, because there was a time the Taiwanese refused to marry to the Chinese and vice versa. But nowadays there is no such kind. There was no such kind of prejudice anymore. And it is said that the 13% of the population from mainland China was not scarce or separated or distributed so evenly. In Taipei, 30% of the Taiwanese, the population in Taipei should be from mainland China, and the second largest place of for the mainland Chinese should be Hualien County. Hualien is very interesting. You have a quarter of the population from mainland China, quarter of them is the Minnan group, and quarter of them Hakka, and another quarter would be the Aborigines. And therefore, there in Hualien, if you have been there, the people would dare not to presume that you are from anywhere, and that's the only place the Minnan dialect was not kind of the most popular language there for the people there. Most of the people will use Chinese, Mandarin, I mean. So, when Chiang Kai-shek moved to Taiwan, certainly the PRC were not happy, and therefore they wanted to liberate Taiwan. And this slogan sometimes was turned into, we have to wash Taiwan with blood. 学习台湾. We must liberate Taiwan. We must wash Taiwan with our blood. So anyway, the PLA decided to massive the troops to Taiwan, to attack Taiwan. And the first trial was actually in the early 1950. In June 1950, they have already started this work, the project. But in June 1950, Korean War broke out. This is of great importance because with the outbreak of the war, the United States decided to get involved with the affairs in Far East, and the 7th Fleet was sent to Taiwan Strait. And as you can see here is the USS ship Maryland, and this picture was taken in 1945. And I think the US ship Maryland was actually involved with the Pearl Harbor incident, right? And with the presence of the 7th Fleet, I think the situation in Taiwan Strait calmed down a bit. And then the Chinese decided to send troops to Northern Korea to help out their socialist brothers, right? And this is the picture of the Chinese soldiers who fought on the battlefield. A lot of people died. A lot of Chinese soldiers died in this war, much more than was previous in the Sino-Japanese War, because in the 1950s the Americans, their military presence in Korean Peninsula was much stronger, and their weaponry far more advanced. And you can see the Chinese only with rifles or small artillery, and there was no challenge to the Americans. And a lot of people were killed, and a lot of people were actually taken prisoner. And the POW issue became later on a very important issue. And the Korean War lasted a while without any kind of decisive winning or losing character, and therefore they decided perhaps we should talk. And the peace talk between the States and North Korea never stopped. I think they are still talking nowadays across the Bamendian area. And you can see here is the American military leaders talking to the North Korean colleagues. And, then the so-called Korean War was actually participated by Russian, supported by Russian as well as by the Chinese. So Beijing decided to send troops to Korean Peninsula, and certainly when they did so, the pressure on Taiwan eased off immediately. And on the other hand, Chiang Kai-shek tried several times to take this opportunity to attack the southeast coast of China. We should not forget, so in the 1960s, with the outbreak of the Vietnam War, Chiang Kai-shek had another kind of attempt to fight against, or to try to reconquer mainland China by sending troops to Vietnam, and from there they can attack mainland China. But certainly this kind of operation would rely heavily on American help. But on the other hand, the American government never wanted these things to happen because the price to pay is too high. So in Taiwan, only recently there was actually a so-called 国光 national glory project was actually exposed, and Chiang Kai-shek did actually plan this kind of military reconquering of mainland China. So this here during the Korean War, the Chiang Kai-shek actually tried several times to send troops to fight against the Chinese, but all these moves failed. And when the Korean War came to a halt, the United States realized, okay, the stability in Taiwan Strait was really important, and therefore they signed with Taiwanese government a mutual defense treaty. And this move was actually of great help to stabilize this political situation on Taiwan. And here you can see the POWs of the Korean War captured during the fight. Some of them were actually sent back to mainland China. And we should not forget, those soldiers or the officers, commanders sent to Korean Peninsula belonged or had belonged to the KMT's army previously. So they were actually sent to Korea to be, say, distinguished by the Americans. When they were sent back to mainland China, they were actually expelled from the political power scene, and some of them were actually sent far away to Xinjiang, to Mongolia, to, say, do the constructing or opening up the colony settlement there. So they faced a very miserable destiny on mainland China. And some of them choose to come to Taiwan, or some of them said that some of them were actually forced to come to Taiwan. That's a political slogan, because you can see that the soldiers rather choose to the freedom, they want to come to Taiwan. So, and in Taiwan, again, we call these people sent to Taiwan by the American ships as the anti-communist samples or examples. So you can see here that the soldiers have tattoos on their chests, on their arms, everywhere, to show that they wish to go to Taiwan, because they say that with the Chinese flags on their chest, if they should be sent back to China, they will be punished, and just out of the human reasons, the American government will have to send them back to Taiwan. And those soldiers sent back to Taiwan, some of them were actually put into different armies to serve further on as the military servicemen. Some of them wounded then will be, say, placed to different organizations, government bureaus, as janitors, for example. And in Zhengda, I think I was in the university, say in the 1970s, a lot of janitors were actually of these kind of POWs. They always kind of can show you, each and every one of them have these tattoos. And when the Taiwanese government decided to, okay, people from mainland China will have the right to go back to visit their hometown, then a lot of soldiers say, I dare not go back because I have on my arm this kind of slogan, want to kill Mao Zedong, want to kill Zhu De, and these kind of tattoos. So the government even kind of provided them with this amount of money to get these tattoos removed. And some of them still have these tattoos nowadays, like you can see this one. Oman, the picture was actually taken 2004, and Oman was the national flag on his chest. He has to live with this kind of tattoo lifelong. So, when the political situation was actually eased off or stabilized by the signing of the Mutual Defense Treaty between Chiang Kai-shek and the American government, then there was still kind of necessity for the Taiwanese to build a strong army for self-defense. So beforehand, there was estimated around 300,000 soldiers came to Taiwan in 1949, and the army was not strong enough to attack China again. But however, Chiang Kai-shek had demonstrated a strong military presence to deter the possible threat from mainland China. So therefore, there's always kind of a parade took place in Taiwan on the 10th of October, the double 10th we call it, 1951. The first parade took place, and Chiang Kai-shek just wanted to display the military strength and to reassure the people of Taiwan that you are safe, we can defend ourselves. So in the following 10 years, parades were actually organized 8 times. As you can see, the first double 10s, there was actually the first one in Taiwan after the Japanese occupation. The double 10s military parade. The place also right in front of the president's office. But the PRC would never let the Taiwanese be alone, and therefore the first Taiwan Straits crisis started, first of all in 1955. So there were 2 offshore islands, big islands, the main islands, outside of the on the coastal area of Zhejiang province. The one is actually called the Dachen and Yijiangshan. The Dachen was actually under control by the Republic of China, and during the evacuation action of 1955, as for how many were actually evacuated, we don't really know. But there was actually quite a lot of these Dachen people. And the story was actually that as you can see, these offshore islands here, controlled by Chiang Kai-shek, certainly the Mao Zedong or the PRC were happy with that fact, and therefore they wanted to liberate these offshore islands first of all, and they massived a lot of ships to attack the Yijiangshan first of all. Okay. Now, January 1955, the Chinese army took the Yijiangshan Islands, an offshore island of the Zhejiang province. Chiang Kai-shek sent his troops there, but the heavy bombardment made the islands really hit the island really seriously, and the Yijiangshan was actually totally destroyed by the Chinese army. And the neighboring island, Dachen, was actually in danger, and therefore the Chiang Kai-shek bargained with the American government, because they said, you have signed the mutual defense treaty with us, now you should help us to defend Dachen. But certainly the Americans wouldn't do this. It was too dangerous, too risky. And therefore Chiang Kai-shek bargained with the Americans, okay, I give up Dachen, but you have to promise to keep Jinmen and Mazu, these 2 offshore islands, and which was actually okayed by the American government. So therefore the American Navy helped the Chinese or Taiwanese to evacuate the people from mainland China, from Yijiangshan. As you can see, the US 7th Fleet used a lot of boats, aircraft, to move 14,000 of civilians, 10,000 of the servicemen, 4,000 of guerrilla fighters, and so on. A lot of equipment and so on were actually evacuated to Taiwan, and it was actually one of the most important Dachen retreat. I'll show you footage later after a break. All right, 10 minutes break.